Of course, the residents of Donbass were attempting in any way to prevent this horror. Hopes were pinned on implementation of the Minsk agreements, which in 2015 the Security Council endorsed, or section of the recent documentary 8 years before Donbass by U.S. in this excerpt, the U.S. journalist Donald Courter provides a clear picture about the expectations and realities of the Minsk agreements.
Devastating conflict. Among the 29 ceasefires agreed upon to that effect, the Minsk agreements were by far the most significant. The most recent one, Minsk II, was agreed upon on February 12, 2015, following the failure of the short-lived Minsk I agreements signed on September 5, 2014. Ukraine, Russia, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe all signed off on Minsk II as part of the Trilateral Contact Group, along with the administrative heads of the Lugansk and the Donetsk People's Republics. Both sides have accused each other of frequent violations, and there is likely blame on both sides if you consider retaliatory fire to be just as much a violation as fire that provokes the adversary. But if you don't consider self-defense a violation, then we have to consider who was most provocative. The People's Republics, for their part, had every incentive to abide by the Minsk Protocols until Russia's military operation began. They were on the back foot, outmanned, outgunned, and in a tough economic spot. For Donetsk and Lugansk, the choice was between continuing to fight a brutal, stalemated war at a disadvantage, or to try to make a ceasefire work. Kiev, on the other hand, was seemingly superior in terms of manpower and equipment. Therefore, it had every reason to attempt to strong-arm Donbass into submission. Daily reports from the LPR administration on the Telegram messaging app documented Ukraine's violations of the Minsk Protocols throughout those 8 years.
Journalists who visited Donbass in order to see for themselves what was happening on that side of the line of contact heard the personal stories of hundreds of war-ravaged lives. People who were tormented, who were tortured and killed in their own homes, genuinely did not understand the reasons for such hatred. Here is a victim of the Ukrainian shelling of Donetsk, Yulia Mikhailova, and in the interview, Donald Courter questions her with a very difficult question.
Почему? Полдевятого утра, обычный день, зимний день, морозный день, прекрасный день. Что в голове стрельнуло, чтобы вы стрельнули именно в остановку? Почему? Там люди, очень много людей. Это такой я же говорю, такой островочек этой остановки, что там всегда движение есть людей, машин. Почему не в лес? Я не знаю, в воду, в небо, куда угодно. Вы зачем людей убиваете? Вот у меня вопрос. Зачем вы убиваете, калечите детей, людей, наших солдат, мужей, в общем, всех. Вы калечите не только тела, вы калечите и души, с которым, с этим надо дальше жить. То есть, может, им и дальше легко жить с этим. Он стрельнул и забыл, все, он сделал свою работу, ну а нам дальше с этим жить.
The Russian Federation has, for all of these years, consistently drawn the international community's attention to the lawlessness being perpetrated by Kiev. Every year, on the day of the signing of the Minsk agreements, we called upon Ukraine to implement them at the Security Council chamber. This is far from the first ARIA formula meeting which we have organized on this issue. Each of these meetings starkly attested to the fact that the history of Donbass over the past 9 years is the story of the suffering of civilians and broken lives.